Welcome everybody to the series explaining Du Fu's poems. This is the first installment, and today we are going to talk about the poem which you can see before you on the screen. We have the Chinese text and we have the English translation by Stephen Owen. This is the first, or I should say, the earliest preserved poem by Du Fu, and it is called Wang Yue, Gazing on the Peak, Viewing the Mountain. So this is, as I said, the earliest of Du Fu's many poems, and we don't know exactly when it was written, but it should be sometime after 736 or so. And that is when Du Fu was about 24 years old. This is not his first poem or anything like that. It is known that Du Fu had destroyed thousands of his earlier poems, and from his early years most of them do not survive. This is the one we think is the earliest, and perhaps he sort of neglected to destroy it because of its quality, because it is certainly a very great poem. And as you can see, it is, well, it looks like a Lü Shi. If you just look at it like that, you could see that it has 8 lines. It looks like a regulated verse with parallel constructions in the 2 middle couplets, but in fact it's not a Lü Shi. At least it's not a proper Lü Shi. In a proper Lü Shi, we have always the rhyming words are in the ancient level tone, which translates to first or second tone in modern Mandarin, and here we have the rhyming liao, xiao, niao, xiao. It's the third tone in modern Mandarin. It's not a Lü Shi, but we can say it's a sort of variety of Lü Shi. It's pretty close to a regulated verse. And the theme is gazing on Mount Taishan. So Mount Taishan, just as many of you probably know, is the mountain of the east. The mountain of the east is the so-called Dongyue. There is an ancient sacred geography of mountains in China, where there are 5 mountains, 1 for each of the cardinal directions and 1 of the center. And the eastern one is this one, and it's frequently treated as the most preeminent of them. It's perhaps most preeminent for being the place where the Feng and Shan rituals were performed. These are ancient rituals to the heaven and earth, which are said to confirm a ruler's status as the chosen of heaven to rule. And it was performed at the earliest, from what we know, by the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. And here Du Fu is visiting it. Many of these early poems are from his travels in the modern Shandong region, or the eastern parts of China. And he is looking at the mountain, and probably he did climb it afterwards as well. But we don't have a poem for that. And we'll look at these 2 lines by one. So, 岱宗夫如何，其路清未了. 岱宗is another name for Mount Tai. From what I know, this character, Dai, only occurs as an alternative name for Taishan. And this Fu Ru He, it's not much of a sentence actually. It's a rather strange utterance. This Fu Ru He, Dai Zong Ru He, we understand what that means. It's what it says in the translation. What then is Dai Zong like? But how are we to understand this Fu Ru He? Fu usually doesn't occur in the middle of sentences like this. We could imagine something like 福代宗如何 as for what 代宗 is like. But here we have a strange construction. 代宗福如何 I would say that this is just something that gives you a sort of sense of this being an exclamation. This is an exclamation of awe. You have someone looking at this immense peak of such great cultural significance and exclaiming 代宗福如何 and the answer comes 齐鲁青未了 a magnificent line. And Qi and Lu, they are of course geographical coordinates, we might say. Qi and Lu are two ancient states in the Shandong area, and they are part of the surrounding landscape around Taishan. And of course, these states did not exist in Du Fu's time, but the area is still very much associated with these states. Lu is still the abbreviated character for Shandong province today. And the Qi is more or less located on the north of Taishan and Lu on the south of Taishan. And then you have Qing Wei Liao, which is also a very striking, striking sort of description. Qing Wei Liao. I suppose a lesser poet would have written Qing Wu Qiong, Wei Liao. Wu Qiong has more or less the sort of the same significance. The translation says green unending, but compared to Wu Qiong, Wei Liao also has a sort of temporal aspect, so it gives you the feeling almost that this is all there is of the green of Qianlu, the mountain covered with its vegetation, as far as you can see. But it still does not exhaust the richness of this mountain and the forces that are gathered together here, as we will see later on in the poem. And Qing, I think also, at least this makes me think of it this way, even though I don't know if this use is sanctioned by classical Chinese. Qing, I see it also as a sort of metaphorical green, the green of Qi and Lu, because Qi and Lu are sort of bywords for civilization and culture in Chinese history. In the pre-imperial China, Qi was certainly among the major states the one most associated with culture and learning. And Lu is, of course, though a minor state, it is the home state of Confucius. So Qi and Lu, the green of Qi and Lu still is not consumed. It has not ended. The vegetation of their learning and cultural splendor goes on, and we can see this captured in the magnificent silhouette of Taishan. And then we go on to the next two lines. Here we have a parallel construction. 造化钟神秀，阴阳各混淆. 造化 is, you can treat it as a word actually. It is creation, or the power of creation rather. And zhong is to be understood as concentrated, as compacted, as the translation says. Shen xiu, spirit splendors, or even divine beauty almost, because this mountain is the seat of immense spiritual powers or divine powers, and there's no reason to tone down that here. So divine beauty almost is almost an even better rendering here. 造化钟神秀 and 阴阳各混淆. Yin yang, the translation says dark and light. This I think is a little bit too general. Yin yang, I understand it here as the two sides of the mountain. The two sides of the mountain are called yin and yang. That is the shady side and the sunny side. And the sunny side is, of course, the southern side, and the shady side is the northern side. And a lot of place names, these yin and yang, still occur in China, and when they're situated around a mountain, it means yin means on the north of the mountain, and yang means on the south of the mountain. With rivers, it's the other way around, because the sunny side of the river is the north side. So, for example, Huaiyang, I don't know if there is such a place name. I imagine there is. That would be the north side of the Huai River, and Huaiying would be the south side of the Huai River, and so on. And here so yin yang, when you use it about a mountain, I think we are supposed to understand it as the two sides of the mountain, and it's the two sides of the mountain that sort of cut up the whole view into both dusk and dawn. So the image I get from these two lines together is that you have this feeling that matter has been sort of raised, compacted in one single spot, and raised heavenward by its spiritual powers here, so high that the two sides of the mountain seem to almost separating the respective worlds of dusk and of dawn. And viewing this grand imagery, we move on to the next two lines. 荡胸生层云，觉自入归鸟. Dang says here, exhilarating the breast. Well, dang, the primary significance of dang is to wash or wash away, and also to shake. So shaking and cleansing our breast. Well, I suppose exhilarating is a fair enough rendering of that. Exhilarating the breast, it produces layers of cloud. Yes, this is how we are to understand it. The first two characters here, in both this and the second line, are sort of adverbials to the rest of the line. The three first are actually what you would think of as the logical first characters. They precede sort of in a sort of logical order the former two. It is producing these layers on layers of clouds, 层云, that causes the breast to exhilarate. And it's the same with the next line, 觉字. This is a rather interesting description. 觉, splitting eye pupils. I think 字, actually, it's a very uncommon character, is usually glossed not as pupil but as the corner of the eye. And I think that makes even more sense, because here we are dealing with the birds, homeward bound birds, entering the mountain. 入归鸟. They are entering the mountain, and since we are watching from afar, we almost need to split our eye, the corner of our eye, as if we have to expand the corner of the eye in order to see these small things. So this couplet, it has both the layers and layers upon huge clouds that surrounds the mountain, and the very, very small, the smallest things, flocks of little birds coming home to the mountain. And of course, 层, it may be remarked, probably, is of course just a simplified form of the other 层, layered character. This is quite a common usage, and it's the one we find in the best text for this poem. And then the last two lines are rather easy. I think the most problematic vocabulary here is probably 会当. 会当凌绝顶，一览众山小. 会当 is actually, according to the best commentators, it is a Tang Dynasty colloquialism, so it's not classical, It's a type of spoken language, and it means more or less will. Will with a sort of slant towards must. I have to climb the highest mountain, Ling Jue Ding, the highest summit. And from the top, I will see all other mountains as small, with one sweeping view. 一览众山小. And the last line contains an allusion which every classical reader would pick up immediately. It is from Mencius, where Mencius in one passage says, when Confucius climbed Mount Tai, all the world appeared small to him. So there you have it. 8 lines, a magnificent picture of one of the most sacred sites in ancient China. And the reference to Qi and Lu and the allusion to Confucius, I think it creates an association to the ambitions of Du Fu and other learned men of his time to aspire to the highest, most noble, moral level, the highest virtue, and conveys a sense of the sacred in such an aspiration. And this is by a young man, 24 years old, which promises a lot for the future. Thank you for listening.